My feeling is he's finished. I think he's finished. It's only a matter of time before he goes.
UEFA, CONCACAF, AFC have issued an open letter to the football world saying FIFA President Gianni Infantino has broken trust through deception with the World Cup stake sale process.
Behind the polished meetings and carefully controlled statements at the top of world football, a serious power struggle appears to be breaking into public view. Gianni Infantino is now facing pressure from some of the biggest forces in the sport, and the situation is moving far beyond the kind of disagreement that can simply be handled behind closed doors. UEFA, the Asian Football Confederation, and CONCACAF have all joined the growing challenge to the FIFA president, calling for him to step down and raising major questions about whether he still has the confidence of key figures across the football world.
Gianni Infantino, could you just give us one answer for BBC News? What's your view? Anything else? How's your trip been so far? Have you got the support of all the South American countries?
But the way I'm thinking about it is he can't function. He can't function because he doesn't have the support of everyone at FIFA. For instance, does he have the support of Arsene Wenger? I don't think so. Does he have support of the FIFA Council? Does he have the support of even people within his own administration? I don't think so.
And while this video was still being put together, the story took another turn. More major football organizations stepped in and added their voices to the growing pressure on FIFA. Not long after that statement came out, US Soccer, Canada Soccer, CFU, Caribbean Football Union, and UNCAF, Central American Football Union, joined forces, calling for meaningful change that strengthens FIFA's governance, transparency, and accountability. Their involvement showed that the push was no longer coming from just one corner of the football world.
It's a disaster World Cup. A disaster.
Breaking news concerns more calls for change at FIFA from the open letter from UEFA, CONCACAF and the Asian Football Confederation earlier. We now have US Soccer, Canada Soccer, the Caribbean Football Union and the Central American Football Union saying that they stand together along with our colleagues around the world in calling for meaningful change that strengthens FIFA's governance, transparency and accountability.
Made their position clear through an open letter demanding leadership that serves football, not seeks to command it. That wording hits hard because this is not just criticism of one decision or one failed plan. It puts Infantino's leadership style itself under the microscope, suggesting the dispute is really about who holds the power, how that power is being used, and whether football's biggest decisions are being handled with enough openness and accountability.
I think he's trying to put a brave face on it. He's trying to pretend it's business as usual, but I think it's more and more likely that he is going to have to resign. And if he doesn't resign, then I think UEFA, the Asian Football Confederation and CONCACAF will maybe call an emergency meeting, the council or the Congress, and try and force him out that way.
At the center of this escalating drama is Infantino's failed football forward enterprise scheme. Once details surrounding the proposal became public, the backlash quickly grew into something much bigger. Instead of staying focused on whether one project worked or failed, the argument has expanded into a wider battle over trust, influence, and decision-making inside the sport's most powerful institutions. And the language being used shows just how ugly this political fight has become. UEFA, the Asian Football Confederation, and CONCACAF accused Infantino of trust broken through deception, an unusually sharp allegation in football politics. With several major governing bodies now publicly challenging the man at the top of FIFA, this has become more than another boardroom dispute. The real battle is now over confidence in the leadership and who gets to shape the future direction of world football. What makes this dispute even more serious is that the criticism goes far beyond whether Infantino's proposal succeeded or crashed.
But that is very, very risky because he may have the votes to survive a vote of no confidence. And that is why I think UEFA, AFC, CONCACAF have not come out and called for that emergency meeting yet, because they have to be absolutely sure that they have the numbers to win that vote.
The three confederations also took aim at the way the whole thing was handled, arguing that Infantino failed to recognize that a plan of this size should not have been pushed forward unilaterally. From their point of view, a decision with such a huge potential impact on world football needed wider discussion before anything was set in motion. That is where the real tension starts to show. The issue is not simply about one scheme falling apart. It is about who was actually brought into the conversation, who was left on the sidelines, and whether football's major confederations were given the respect and influence they believe they deserve. When decisions at this level can affect competitions, money, and the wider structure of the game, the process behind those decisions becomes just as important as the final result. And with several powerful organizations now standing on the same side, Infantino is facing a challenge that is getting harder to brush aside. But things could get even messier, because this power struggle is beginning to move away from strongly worded letters and straight into the football calendar itself. The three confederations have already started early discussions about potentially creating competitions of their own, opening the door to a completely different kind of battle between football's biggest governing bodies.
I mean FIFA. They have to solve every problem here, but unfortunately they couldn't solve since the beginning. Mr. Infantino came to our changing room first game and he said, it's just the beginning.
At the same time, UEFA has continued raising the possibility of boycotting FIFA events, adding another serious pressure point to an already heated situation. If those tensions keep building, players, clubs, and major tournaments could eventually get caught right in the middle. What started as a disagreement over leadership and decision-making now carries the possibility of competing tournaments, disrupted events, and a much deeper fight over who controls the biggest stages in international football. And now, this boardroom war could start having consequences where people will actually notice them on the pitch. One of the first major events potentially caught in this growing standoff is next month's Under-20 Women's World Cup. As the situation currently stands, there is a possibility that the tournament could move forward without European teams, while alternative options are reportedly being looked at behind the scenes. If that happens, it would show that this dispute has crossed a serious line, going from political pressure at the top into decisions that could directly change the shape of international competitions. A World Cup without European representation would be no small development. It would send a powerful message about just how deep the disagreement has become between FIFA and some of football's biggest regional authorities. Moves that might once have sounded too extreme to seriously consider are now being discussed as possible responses, showing that neither side appears eager to simply back down. And there is another reason this open letter cannot easily be treated like background noise. Look at the heavyweight names attached to it. The letter is signed by UEFA President Alexander Ceferin, AFC President Sheikh Salman bin Ibrahim Al Khalifa, and CONCACAF President Victor Montagliani. Between them, these officials represent three enormous sections of the global football system. Their combined challenge gives the criticism much more political weight and puts even more attention on Infantino's position. Meanwhile, another game is reportedly unfolding. Away from the cameras, the question of who could eventually take Infantino's place. Efforts to bring different groups together behind a suitable replacement candidate have reportedly picked up since details of his privately backed plan became public. That suggests some figures may already be looking beyond the current confrontation and thinking about what the leadership structure could look like if a change at the top actually happens. One name believed to be in the mix is Montagliani himself. That makes the situation even more interesting, because the CONCACAF president is not only attached to the public challenge against Infantino, but is also reportedly being discussed as a possible contender. If the leadership fight keeps gaining momentum, the battle may soon become about much more than opposing Infantino's decisions. It could turn into a serious contest over who gets control of FIFA's next chapter and where the balance of power in world football goes from here. At this stage, the gloves are clearly coming off in football's growing leadership battle. The people challenging Infantino are no longer hiding their frustration behind careful diplomatic wording or vague concerns about policy. Their open letter goes straight into the most sensitive part of this entire controversy: power, trust, and whether the people sitting at the top of the game are actually working for football as a whole or allowing too much authority to become concentrated around one person. That is what makes the wording of this letter stand out. Public statements from major football organizations are often carefully written to avoid creating an even bigger political storm. This one takes a noticeably tougher route. Instead of focusing only on the failed proposal, The letter questions the basic principles behind leadership itself. In other words, this is not being presented as some routine disagreement where everyone shakes hands and moves on. The criticism goes directly to how authority is being exercised at the highest level of world football. Then comes one of the strongest sections of the entire letter. Leadership in football is not a possession, part of the letter reads. It is not about holding or demanding power to be held. It is a duty of service to the football family that entrusts it. When trust is broken through deception, when an individual places himself above the collective that entrusted him with authority, that duty has been abandoned. That language leaves very little mystery about how serious the breakdown has become. The letter frames leadership as something that must be earned through responsibility and service, rather than something that belongs permanently to whoever currently holds the position. More importantly, phrases such as "trust is broken through deception" dramatically raise the temperature of the dispute because they turn the conversation from a disagreement about strategy into a much more personal question about confidence in the leadership. And the reference to an individual placing himself above the collective cuts even deeper. The argument being presented is not simply about who controls FIFA or who wins a political showdown. It is about whether major decisions are being made with the wider football community or pushed through from the top without enough collective involvement. With language this pointed appearing in a public letter, the split between these powerful football figures is becoming increasingly difficult to hide. But the apology did not make this storm disappear. If anything, it became another major piece of the argument. After a meeting involving a small circle of senior staff in Rabat, Infantino issued an apology as pressure around the situation continued to grow. Yet according to his critics, the response missed the biggest issue sitting right in front of FIFA. They argued that the problem was not simply how the controversial scheme had been communicated, but whether it should ever have been pushed forward in the first place. That difference might sound small on paper, but politically, it is massive. An apology over communication suggests the main problem was how the message was delivered or explained. The criticism coming from the three confederations goes much further than that. Their argument is that the judgment behind the proposal itself deserves scrutiny, and that treating the controversy mainly as a communication problem does not address why the backlash became so serious. The open letter spells out that position in unusually direct language. It treats this as a failure of communication when what football witnessed was a failure of judgment, the letter says. It did not acknowledge that the proposal itself was inherently wrong. There remains no recognition that attempting to sell an interest in the FIFA World Cup was a profound failure of judgment, not just a procedural misstep, but a fundamental breach of trust with the very institutions FIFA exists to serve. That is a heavy accusation, and it reveals exactly where the two sides appear to be miles apart. According to the letter, this cannot simply be cleaned up by saying the rollout was poorly handled or that people misunderstood what FIFA was trying to achieve. The three confederations are attacking the basic idea behind the proposal, arguing that attempting to sell an interest in the FIFA World Cup crossed a far more serious line. And that puts the spotlight right back on judgment and accountability at the top. The World Cup is FIFA's biggest competition and one of the most valuable properties in global sport, so any proposal involving an interest in it was always likely to face intense scrutiny. For Infantino's critics, the key question is whether FIFA's leadership fully understood how strongly other major football institutions would react before the plan reached this stage. The apology therefore became part of the controversy rather than the moment that ended it. Instead of settling the dispute, it exposed a much deeper disagreement over what actually went wrong. One side may see questions around process and communication, while the letter describes something far more serious: a breakdown in judgment and trust between FIFA and institutions that expect to have a meaningful voice in decisions affecting the global game. And the demands are now reaching beyond the walls of FIFA itself. The three presidents are not simply asking for another internal explanation or a report prepared within football's existing power structure. They are calling for an independent review of the entire controversy. And crucially, they want that investigation handled by an organization from outside the football world. That would put the decisions surrounding the scheme under a completely different level of scrutiny, with outsiders examining what happened rather than FIFA effectively being left to assess its own conduct. That demand adds another layer to an already tense situation. FIFA had previously committed to producing a full report for the FIFA Council at its next scheduled meeting, which would give senior figures inside the organization a closer look at what happened. But for the three leaders challenging Infantino, that apparently does not go far enough. Their push for an external review suggests they want a process that can be seen as separate from the organization and the people now caught in the middle of the controversy. Then there is the money question, and this is where the political stakes get even more sensitive. Financial assistance from FIFA matters enormously to football associations around the world, particularly those relying on that support for development programs, facilities, and the wider growth of the game. Against that backdrop, concerns have emerged over whether individual countries could risk losing financial support if there were eventually a change in FIFA's leadership. The letter's authors directly reject that suggestion. They say the dispute is not about any member association losing the support it has earned, despite the fear-mongering directed at our leadership to suggest otherwise. Their message is clear. Whatever happens in the fight over Infantino's future, they do not want national football associations to view the leadership challenge as a threat to financial assistance they already receive. That is an important political line to draw, because a leadership battle at FIFA is not only about the people sitting around the biggest tables. Member associations across the world also have their own interests to protect, and funding can become a major concern whenever serious change at the top is being discussed. By addressing that fear publicly, the three presidents are attempting to keep the argument focused on leadership, accountability, and decision-making, rather than allowing the dispute to become a fight over which countries might gain or lose financially. And then, the letter closes with some of its most pointed language, bringing the whole confrontation back to the bigger question of how world football should actually be led. The letter concludes, "There is silence where there should be accountability, distance where there should be openness. Football's strength has always been its unity. We call for that unity to be honored now, with leadership that serves football, not seeks to command it." Those words underline how far relations appear to have deteriorated. The criticism is no longer limited to one proposal, one apology, or one internal process. The letter is presenting the dispute as a wider argument over transparency, collective leadership, and whether the institutions responsible for running the global game still trust the direction being taken at the very top. But calling for change is one thing. Actually building enough support to make that change happen is where this battle gets much more complicated. The message from the three presidents has been carefully aimed at leadership, trust, and accountability, making their position increasingly difficult to misunderstand. They clearly believe serious changes are needed in the way this crisis is being handled. But if the goal eventually becomes replacing Infantino, strong words alone will not decide what happens next. And now, there is a deadline hanging over every move. Anyone hoping to challenge in the FIFA presidential election must formally declare their candidacy by 18 November. That gives Infantino's opponents only a limited amount of time to decide whether they have a realistic challenger, bring different interests together, and work out whether enough support actually exists to turn this political revolt into a serious election contest. The three confederations are understood to be examining every available option as they consider how Infantino could potentially be replaced. Any move, however, would have to remain within FIFA's statutes and established governance framework. So while there is plenty of space for political maneuvering behind the scenes, there are still rules around how a challenge can be mounted and how any candidate must enter the race. That is when the numbers start becoming more important than the headlines. UEFA, the AFC, and CONCACAF may have taken a strong position through their leadership, but those confederations are made up of individual national associations with their own interests, relationships, and votes. A statement from three powerful presidents does not automatically mean every association beneath them will line up behind the same position when the pressure really hits. And outside Europe, that problem appears especially important. Relatively few national associations have been willing to openly challenge Infantino so far. An even smaller group appear ready to withdraw letters of support they had previously sent backing his re-election next March. That creates a serious gap between making a public case against his leadership and actually gathering enough voting power to remove him. In other words, this fight could look huge from the outside while becoming much tighter once every individual vote is counted. Confederation leaders can apply pressure and try to shape the wider conversation, but FIFA's election ultimately depends on support from its member associations. Those associations may not always follow the political direction being pushed by the leadership of their regional confederation. And Infantino still has powerful allies of his own. Africa's CAF and South America's CONMEBOL have publicly backed him in recent days, giving him support from two major blocs in global football. Their involvement changes the political maths considerably and makes this far from a one-sided revolt. Now the real contest is developing underneath all the public statements. Potential candidates, voting commitments, and alliances could become just as important as the accusations that triggered this crisis. With the 18 November deadline getting closer, both camps have limited time to find out who is genuinely standing with them and who is only watching from the sidelines. But even with all the political moves, private discussions, and public pressure flying around, one major question is still sitting right in the middle of this whole situation. When are the people asking for answers actually going to get them? Because while the battle over Infantino's future keeps getting louder, some major member associations reportedly still want to hear directly from the man at the center of the controversy. A number of larger member associations have reportedly written directly to Infantino, requesting a meeting where they expect him to explain his actions surrounding the FFE scheme. According to the report, those associations have received no response. And at a moment when every move at the top of FIFA is being watched closely, that reported lack of communication is only giving people more to talk about. Infantino has also reportedly not contacted the federations directly to address concerns surrounding his own leading role in the turmoil. That does not answer any of the questions already being raised. Instead, it adds another layer to a story already packed with political pressure, competing alliances, and uncertainty over what happens next. Because look at where things currently stand. Powerful confederation leaders are openly challenging Infantino. There is discussion about finding a possible rival before the presidential election deadline. Some associations reportedly want direct explanations, while other major football blocs continue to support him. So this is not some simple situation where everybody is standing on one side. The football world appears divided, and the real test will be whether the opposition can turn its public criticism into enough concrete support to seriously challenge Infantino's position. Now all eyes turn toward what happens next. Will Infantino eventually sit down with the associations demanding answers and give them the explanation they are looking for? Will his opponents find a serious candidate capable of bringing enough member associations together? Or will Infantino's existing support prove strong enough to survive this growing challenge? And there is an even bigger question hanging over everything. Could this confrontation eventually change who controls the most powerful position in world football? Or will all the noise, letters, and political maneuvering end without producing a change at the top? Drop your take in the comments and tell us where you stand. Do you think Infantino should remain in charge of FIFA, or do you believe the organization needs a completely different direction? Keep the debate respectful, because there are clearly strong arguments and powerful interests on both sides of this fight. And if you made it all the way to the end, show Matchio some love. Like the video, share it with another football fan who needs to see what is happening behind the scenes, and subscribe to Matchio for more major football stories, controversies, power struggles, and developments from across the global game. Make sure you turn on notifications too, because when the next move drops in this FIFA battle, you will want to know exactly what happened, who made the move, and what it could mean for the future of football. Thanks for watching and supporting Matchio. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.